Hey everybody. It's been a couple weeks. Has it been? Yeah. um January 2017, man. It's been a weird month. I'll tell you. So I mentioned in recent videos that I was away working on a production of a play of mine that's up and running now. I just came back this week. The first weekend went really well. It got I wouldn't call it a review. It was done on a blog, but it got some nice comments from a local editor writer who has a blog. And if you're in the southwestern Virginia area, you could go see it if you wanted to. I've been trying to write and finding that difficult, and I've been reading a lot of books and mostly, let me grab one of them because I just finished it. Everyone knows this book. But I'm, like many folks, I'm in a space of exploring what life looks like beyond Rider Waite Smith. After, in my case, I've talked about this before. I've been reading for about 17 or 18 years. And if I had one piece of advice for anyone literally just starting out, learn a Marseille style first, and then go to Rider Waite. I wish I could kind of unlearn what I've learned. Anyway, this is the very famous open reading by Yoav Ben-Dov, who this was a really good. I mean, this is a really popular book, so nobody needs my commentary on it. But this was one of the first books in a long time where reading about the major arcana actually made me think differently about it. Like it showed me new things about it. So I liked this book quite a bit. So it is a Marseille inspired book. I'm also reading the Jodorowsky The Way of the Tarot. It's in the other room. It's a huge monster of a book. I like that one a lot too. It's worth I've got the reason I got that one is, do I even have it with me? Yeah. So it's been kind of everywhere lately, but I've got the Jodorowsky Marseille because the Yoav Ben-Dov one is not gettable right now because, like I said, he passed away last month or the month before. It looks like it's going to be available again in the coming months. His estate, I don't know what to call it. Anyway, so I actually do want that one though, because while I'm enjoying the Jodorowsky book, it's it and honestly, I don't buy everything he's selling. There are some things that just in his deck. See, I shuffled it earlier just to sort of see how it felt to shuffle, and now I'm not gonna. I didn't expect to be talking about this, but like I do, I go off on tangents. I think that while the deck looks really good, and I would recommend this as a Marseille deck if you're interested in getting one right away, I think I'm looking for the Papus. Ah, here she is. I think what's interesting about Jodorowsky is that he has kind of an Edward Waite quality to his work that makes my my detectors go, I'm not buying it. Like, so here's the Empress card. I don't the Papus card or the High Priestess, and he talks about how she's sitting on an egg. And if you look closely, there's a shape that resembles an egg. I don't find it all that. It looks more like a demi-tasse or a teacup to me. But anyway, he talks about how she's sitting on an egg. Great symbolism, but there's literally not a single online copy of any Marseille deck where I have seen that. So I feel like there's a degree to which he sort of and his partner in this have kind of imposed their own symbolism. And we know tarot is a game. We know it was. I am not a believer that any deck, Marseille, the Visconti Sforza, any of the early decks had any symbol. It's my opinion, again, everything, you can take it with a grain of salt. It's my opinion that it really was a game, and that there really was no intentional symbolism. I think they were depicting allegory. They were depicting allegories. They were depicting what would have been at the time recognizable mythologies. And in the case of the Sforza deck, the Visconti Sforza deck, we know they were depicting members of the family. So I am not a believer in secret symbols hidden, coded into any deck. And so it makes me slightly suspicious when I see things interpolated into a deck that is meant to be historical. And then when you look at their website, this is a very interesting thing that happens where they talk about how some decisions were made in their professional secrets. And that makes me go, I don't buy it. The Jodorowsky, it's like I said, it's in the other room. It's a really big monster of a book. It's good, though. I'm enjoying reading it, and it's interesting to look at life tarot from a Marseille point of view. This is all, of course, influenced by various of the YouTube people that I love and whose videos I love. Oh God, see, I hate mentioning other YouTube bloggers because I then am worried I'm going to say their name wrong. I think it's Sacred Seed, whose videos I really love because of her amazingly joyous energy, has a lot of Marseille-inspired videos. And then, of course, Kelly from The Truth and Story has been talking about Marseille March and has been doing a lot of videos about not Marseille-inspired, but Pip-inspired decks and kind of alternate associations, and they're all very interesting. So I've been kind of plowing through old tarot books on sort of Waite Smith-inspired, and it hasn't... Like, no book out there has sort of told me something I haven't read already. So exploring these Marseille books has been interesting. So that's one thing I've been doing. Another thing I've been doing is just dealing with stress and anxiety that comes out of life, and also feeling sort of continued fretting over American politics, but I won't belabor that. And I've already talked for almost 10 minutes. So hopefully you're still with me. What I actually was making this video to be about was just another way to think about reading. Something that comes up occasionally in questions that I get on my videos, particularly the ones I made about the suits and the major arcana, where I sort of went through each card and talked about my experience with them, is the idea of light and shadow. And how do you know when a card is giving you its light aspects or when it's giving you its shadow aspects? And so that was one thing I wanted to talk more about. And another thing I wanted to talk about is just sort of a kind of fast and loose isn't the word. Loose might be. Kind of a loose interpretive technique I sometimes will do when I'm reading. When I don't necessarily feel called to use a spread. So what I thought I would do is just kind of walk you through again, like the inner monologue of a reading where there's no spread, and in a situation where I'm not even necessarily fully committed to the card's location in the reading kind of meaning anything. So that, it really is fast and loose in that, so I'm going to do a 9-card spread. What I thought I would do is like a couple examples with a couple decks that are new to my collection and that I haven't had a whole lot of time to play around with. I'm going to raise this up. It's pretty pretty sad that I've spent this long before getting to the whole topic of this video. So let's start with the wooden tarot, right? Because I literally have not even done a reading with this one yet. I did kind of edge it a little bit, just because, you know, it looks so much like, it really does look so much like wood, which I guess technically it is, because cardboard is made of wood. Let's say, in this example, that I'm reading for someone who has a general question about their love life. They haven't given me a whole lot of information, but let's say it's a woman and she's wondering about the sustainability of her relationship. All right. So she's been in a relationship. I'm just inventing this. She's been in a relationship for a couple of years. She's wondering about the relationship's sustainability, but that's all she's told me. So I, without being called to use a specific spread, because I'm not being asked, for example, about making a decision, so I wouldn't use my trajectory or decision-making spread. I could do an elemental spread, but I don't, I'm just not feeling called to that. So what I'm going to do is this sort of 9-card spread that I often use. And one of the reasons why boy, who can't shuffle tonight? This guy can't. What was I saying? One of the reasons why I do a 9-card is kind of my go-to is because, as I've talked about before, I tend to view that's my version of a 3-card, because I traditionally will use 3 cards. Oh, that's an extra card, the happy squirrel. I will use 3 cards as one in a reading, and so yes, you can see that. So I would interpret this as a combination. So we've got the 8 of plumes, which is the 8 of swords, the hanged man, and then the 7 of bones, which is pentacles, if I'm not mistaken. And I think stone. See, this is why I'm using this deck, because I haven't worked with it much. Stones in this deck are fire, bones are earth, I believe, and then cups are blooms. Yeah. So anyway, I would read these 3 as sort of 1 card. But what I'm going to do is something a little bit differently that I occasionally do when I'm feeling kind of stuck or bored with the usual, or I just don't sort of know. Or this is something I'll even do when the spread as I laid it out isn't sort of speaking in the way I hoped it would. So I would do my normal 9-card layout, which looks like this. So let's see. So we have the 8 of plumes, the hanged man, the 7 of bones, the tower, temperance, the 7 of blooms, which would be cups, the chariot, the queen of bones, which would be the queen of pentacles, and the queen of blooms, which would be the queen of cups. So what I would do in this instance, right, if I'm reading this way, whether I've whether I've assigned positions to this and it's just not speaking to me, or I just intended to start, is I sort of explore the layout, and I just let something call to me as the theme, or as like the thing I need to start with. And what, I don't know how to describe it. Like sometimes people will like put their hand over and they can start to feel a little tingle or a little bit of heat. Like right now for me, I feel like this like sort of warmth coming from the Tower card. And this is the thing. I've talked about this before in my intuition videos, right? Is I feel like you just need to go with those little clicks of impulse, right? it's like, okay, this little warmth is pulling me toward the tower. So I'm going to start with this and say, I feel like the theme of this reading is about the tower, right? Which is, interestingly, and I hadn't thought about this until just now because I really am doing this for real. Not it's not a real reading, but I'm making these associations in real time. The question that my client asked me about was about the sustainability of her relationship. The card that's calling me is the tower. So this is a card that's not really about sustainability. So immediately I'm sort of feeling like deep down there is like a concern of lack of sustainability, which she wouldn't be asking about, obviously, if she wasn't concerned about sustainability. But so I feel like the foundation is rocky. The foundation on which this relationship stands is rocky. It's probably going through a rocky, tumultuous time. Again, probably why she asked about it. If the person's here, then I can ask those questions. If most of my readings, like I say, are not done that way. Most of them are done by video. So that gives me an interesting foundation. Interesting in the sense that it kind of confirms for me that the question is valid, which is an odd thing to say because in their way, every question that a client asks is valid. But I get a very strong linkage to the question. Like, this is an important issue. And because this is calling, it's like a question of sustainability. What calls to me next is the Hanged Man. So within this tumultuous period, I get a sense of suspension. So I feel like this querent is suspended in tumultuous times. So the relationship probably has been tumultuous for a while. So this combination is making me go, oh yeah, you've been in this suspended animation for a long time. This has been going on. And because of that, you've probably spent a lot of time dwelling and thinking about it. So what calls me next? Interestingly, the Temperance right here in the middle is calling me next because it's such a very different energy from the tower. Traditionally, when there are a lot of major cards in the spread, those will be the ones that grab me. That may not always be the case, but there are four. And so I am called to this completely different energy, this sort of balance, this sort of quality of the soothing quality of the Temperance card. Temperance is interesting to me because I often will consider that word in its literal sense as moderation, and balance, not in a sense of like theoretical, but literal, like not being too extreme. So central to the spread here, this position is interesting to me because there's a deep desire, I feel like, for temperance and a deep capacity for balance, surrounded in a sense, at least on a couple sides, by a suspended sense of discord. So now I decide I'm going to look at the Chariot card. So the Chariot card is a card of movement in many cases, and it's a card of moving away. In this case, it's a snail. So here I'm feeling very drawn to the imagery and even its position. It's moving very slowly away from the rest of the cards, which in their way are kind of, the energy of the cards to me feels very kind of gathered. If you look at the Eight of Plumes, it's sort of gathered into the center. The Tower's energy is here. The Hangman energy comes down. The Queen of Bones and the Queen of Blooms both kind of go into each other. The Queen of Blooms kind of goes up. The Seven of Blooms it has like an expansive energy, but it's not, it's not super like any one way. This is one that seems to be kind of divorcing itself from the rest of the reading. And so now, again, what I'm working you through is my inner monologue, right? I probably won't be saying everything I'm saying right now to someone I'm reading for, because it would likely be very confusing, because I'm just sort of working through what I'm seeing. And so what I do right now is I pause to kind of explain, at least summarize, what the major cards are telling me. That there's a suspended state of animation, a suspended animation state of discord, of unsustainability, of breaking down, a deep desire for temperance that's actually slowly pushing this person away from the relationship. So I get a sense that this person is already kind of checked out, or they're already leaving very slowly. The snail here is very important to me in the Chariot. Some people may be surprised if they're working with this deck to see the snail as the Chariot, but the Chariot is not, it's not erratic energy, and it's light, in its upright, say, or its light shade. It's actually very focused and directed energy. If we look at the Rider-Waite-Smith, or even a Marseille deck, there's a channeling of opposing forces, or not necessarily even opposing forces, but forces with their own brains, a channeling to create movement. So it's a very directed, very focused energy. So the Chariot is not necessarily a fast moving one, even though it feels like stereotypically it should be. We think of chariot races, right? It's not a race, though. In essence, it's more like the Chariot in tarot is a little bit more like a victory parade, which is far more slower moving. So the desire for temperance is sort of pushing this person away from the relationship. So I get, in essence, these four major arcana cards, which drew me most energetically to start with, have again reinforced to me that the request for the reading is valid. Like, this is really something important. It's really something that this querent is worried about. It's something that is affecting her life. It's something that's very actively a part of her experience, and it is a focus. You know what I mean? It is something she needs to think about. So having done that now, I kind of have a sense of the reading and its focus, and in a way I kind of already have an answer. That because the Tower felt like the strongest energy, to me it feels like it's probably not a very sustainable relationship. And I could stop there, except I've got 4 or 5 more cards to think about, and there is an interesting array. One of the things that is interesting to me are the 2 queens at the bottom. So I have the Queen of Bones, which is Pentacles, and the Queen of Blooms, which is Water, or Cups. So I've definitely got a sense of maturity, of balance, of experience, of nurturing. We've got the 8 of Blooms, which is also a very mature emotional card. But if we think about the traditional view, I'm sorry, that's the 7. If we think about the traditional view of the 7, from like the Rider-Waite-Smith, it's like an emotionally overwhelming card where we don't know what choice to make. So though it may seem to me like the lack of sustainability is very evident, this card kind of anchors to me that despite that, inside the situation, it's actually too overwhelming to really even see clearly. And also these 2 people here who are capable of caring for one another, and who bring together two different energies, but that are very, very thoughtful and very careful energies. They're very, I hate the word very, but they are incredibly, again, this is the weird thing about showing you my inner monologue, right? Because I keep reaching for the same words, but there is maturity there. I've settled on the queens as sort of representing the stereotype, the archetype of motherhood, and in that sense, they care for one another, and I get a sense of, you know, losing that would definitely mean kind of losing um, a source of comfort, you know, a source of stability. And there is this sort of conjoined energy between these cards. This is always a weird deck to work with because there's so many eyes, so you can't really see who's looking where. But I mean, these cards are kind of looking toward one another. And there's like a connection there. And I might even wonder if they've been together for a while because of that. I wonder if they are kind of intertwined as a result of having been together for so long. And that's one reason why it's so difficult to fathom ending it and sort of moving away from it, because you know, how do you disengage from something that's become such a part of you, and that feels like your 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 spiritual energy, your yin to your yang, you know. The cups, the water and earth are very complementary, but they are, you know, they're not the same element, so they do complement one another. They fit together. So while you might say that these are accepting energies rather than aggressive energies like earth and fire, I'm sorry, air and fire, we're still, you know, there still is like a connection there, like a yin yang connection there. So that's something that's interesting. There's like this unity, this like connectedness. So in a way, I'm kind of mentally breaking this up, you know what I mean, in my head. So I'm looking at the way cards kind of relate to each other. So you know, this is sort of, and you know, you could do this. You could kind of move them around. So I've looked at all the cards so far except for the top left and right. So I've got the 8 of plumes, the 8 of swords, and I've got the 7 of bones, the 7 of pentacles. And these don't really seem to unite, you know, to other cards in any way, except really to each other, because what I get really as these like flanking energies are like the anxiety of feeling trapped in something that's not working, and the kind of fight or flight energy that comes out of the 8 of swords, or the 8 of plumes in this case, but also the feeling of having put so much work into it, you know, that we get from the 7 of bones, which is the 7 of pentacles in most decks, right? So so we get a sense of like, oh God, what if I'm trapped? But like also, oh God, I've put so much work into this. So what do I do? So that again kind of, it highlights in a way, it does sort of connect in a way to the 7 of blooms, or the 7 of cups, and that feeling of like being emotionally overwrought and not knowing what to do, and there being so many options and not really knowing how to go about them. You know, we don't necessarily, when we're doing a reading, think about moving cards around because it feels like they fall where they may. But in this technique, you know, I've kind of done that mentally, but it can actually help to move things around. But so these cards do seem to have a relationship. This seems to be like a bridge between this and this. But it does become kind of a salad, you know, that you mix up. But ultimately, I see a lot of confirmation of the Tower energy, basically. Being pulled in the two directions of these cards, being stuck in a state of not knowing what to do, the suspended animation, the deep, and you know, this really does feel like it belongs in the center. This kind of deep need and want and potential for just feeling calm and balanced and like not going to extremes, and this sort of slow movement away. So you know, it is interesting to sort of work in this way and just let the cards kind of draw your attention. The analogy I meant to use at the start of this was thinking about it as like a Magic Eye poster. Do you remember those from the 90s? You know, it was like that very computer generated collage art that didn't really look like anything, but as you stared at it and you moved it, further away from your face or closer to your eyes, eventually you'd kind of see this 3D shape start to form. So what looked like just a Jackson Pollock painting initially, you would move it back and forth, and eventually you'd see a ship, or you'd see a flamingo or whatever. Doing a reading this way is kind of like that. And it does make kind of a mess, but I've gotten a lot of information, and moving them around isn't necessarily an important thing. I moved them around in part just so you could sort of see how the relationships were kind of building for me. So I've gone through all of this in my head. Some of it I've said out loud. Some of it I've kept inside as I've kind of worked through it. But now the time has come to make sense of this for the person who has asked the question. And the initial question, of course, was, is my relationship sustainable? Or, what's the likelihood of my relationship being sustainable? So I don't, when questions like that come up that are pretty predictive, what I try to avoid doing is saying, no, it's not. Like, this relationship's a mess. For a couple of reasons. The primary one is I'm not comfortable doing that, flat out. But the other one is that I've already seen how complicated and interconnected these people are. And how much energy is going into considering this. So what I would probably do in this case is try to summarize everything I just said and say, you know what, it does feel like this relationship is in a very transitional phase right now. It's probably tumultuous. It's probably been that way for a long time. You deeply, deeply want calm, and that requirement for calm is making you kind of slowly edge away. So given that, it does feel like the sustainability of it is a bit brittle, because it feels like you're already kind of slowly on your way out. With that in mind, that's a hard decision for you to make, it feels like, because, despite the fear of getting trapped in something that's so exhausting, you have put a lot into it. You do have a lot of emotional energy into it, and you're very connected, and you're very complementary to one another. So if you want to sustain the relationship, what you need to do, or see, the word need is very natural in my conversation because of my job in corporate America. I try to avoid saying that in readings, and I fail constantly. What you may want to do is a much better way to say that, because I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to prescribe medicine. I'm just here to sort of explore what I see. So what you may want to do is address this. If you can address this combo of this sort of suspended state of turmoil, and make this your goal, whether or not the relationship is sustainable. If you make this your goal and you focus on how you get there, everything else may work itself out. Because if the temperance, if this balance, if this lack of excess becomes your goal, then that's going to be something you work on in the relationship. And if the relationship can't handle that, you'll know it and it'll end. And if it can accommodate that, then it'll become a natural part of it, and you won't necessarily feel yourself pulling away that way. But until you address this and make this your central goal, it feels like this kind of suspended state of turmoil is going to go on until you just can't take it anymore. So anyway, I'm not sure that I did a very good job demonstrating this. I hope I have. Let me try another one with a different deck. And I'll use something a little more traditional. The reason why I actually started with something that wasn't really traditional is because I want people to sort of feel like I felt so hamstrung by Rider-Waite, and as much as I liked it, anything that wasn't that, I felt like I couldn't read. And in a weird way, I'm kind of always reading it. I'm always sort of there with the Rider-Waite Smith deck. So let me use, it's not fully traditional, but it's a little bit more. This is the Circo Tarot. Something I love this deck, and I like. Anyway, that's not the point of this video. I need to stop rambling. So let's do something else. We'll do a reading for, boy, my shuffling is not working tonight. Because I'm hungry. Or I'm always hungry, so we can't really use that as an excuse. I'll do 6 cards just to make this a little bit quicker. Let's say that this is a young college student who is in his second year and has really discovered he hates his major and he doesn't know what to do. So he's sort of wondering, you know, what might happen if he changes his major 2 years in. Because that's going to involve spending more time than he thought. And it's going to involve more classes and whatnot. So, you know, what's the energy around changing his major? So again, since it's not a real reading, I guess I don't have to shuffle as aggressively. So let's pick 6. So we get the 9 of Cups, the Devil, the Page of Cups. The one thing I don't like about this deck is that as I get old, I'm going blind and it's hard to read the titles. So we got the 9 of Cups, the Devil, the Page of Cups, the 2 of Cups, the 5 of Cups, and the King of Wands. We have a very cupsy reading here, which is interesting, right? So that draws me immediately. So there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of feeling around this. Passion, feeling is going to be important. But the thing that draws me most strongly initially is actually the Page of Cups. Because pages to me are students. So here I've got a student, and for a moment I'm less interested in the emotional nature of it than that it's a page, than that it's a student. Because what I've got is someone who's feeling very at sea. Let me bring these closer because it's a very subtle deck. Can you see that? Kind of. Ugh, I need better lighting. Anyway, you've got like a student here who's like literally trapped in the middle of the ocean being captured by a giant fish. So we've got a student who's kind of feeling overwhelmed by what he thought he was getting into. I'm also drawn to the Devil and the sense of feeling trapped by some. Again, trapped feels important here, sort of stuck. Not having a whole lot of emotion, sort of feeling bonded to the Devil. But very optimistic and dreamy. So this is a bit of a dreamer who's feeling kind of sad, and a bit of a dreamer who still has some hope. So this Cups energy is so important to me in this reading. It's a very emotional experience for him. And he's feeling very at sea and very stuck and very trapped. So what does he do? Well, the exceptional card here is the King of Wands. So the energy around changing the major is very emotional. And that was what he asked. What's the energy around changing my major? It is going to involve being stuck in school longer because he's going to have to take more classes. That may involve giving some things up and sort of letting go of some things he wanted to do, like graduating early, for example. But his optimism is a good thing, and may help ground him. But with all this fluidity, what he actually may need is some advice from a mentor. So here we have the King of Wands. So there may be someone in a field he's passionate about who can help him make sense of the mess. And again, if I look at the way things are focusing, the king is the only one who's kind of looking away. So the energy around changing majors isn't necessarily bad, but it is bumpy. It's very like alternately exciting and sad. There may be some friends, you know, who could provide advice, but it also may, this is very sad 2 of Cups to me, so it also may feel like he's leaving something he thought he was supposed to do behind. But the uniqueness of this card, from directionality to coloration, it's the only sort of yellow. Everything else is like blues and reds. They're very sort of rich colors. This is very different. So I feel like the key, lands with a mentor in a field he's interested in, something he's passionate about, who can kind of show him the way. So, that again, and I'm trying to do this quickly. I didn't necessarily read in terms of the order I laid them down in or in specific spreads. I started with this guy, and then I kind of looked at how many cups we had. So we had almost all cups. So these things felt really united. This felt like a real block. He feels really sort of stuck. And then the person who's moving out of all of this mess, could be him. I normally, would read a court card as him, but in this case, because this one is so different, it may speak to something that's inside him, but it feels like he needs someone who is wise and who knows what he's doing, man or woman, who's a mentor, who's very, very well versed in the field that he's passionate about, something that he's passionate about, to help him kind of escape this. So you can see, again, spread positions didn't really matter there. And I moved quickly because, again, this video, as always, is longer than I meant it to be. But the point is that you kind of don't really worry about spread positions or where the cards are. You can move them around if you want to. The point is that you're kind of drawn towards energies. And the first thing I do when I read this way, as you saw in both of those often, is I'm kind of looking for a starting point that feels like the energy that the reading is about. And so the Page of Cups in this case was the dominant energy there. And you could, as always, you can keep going further. The devil is blocking him from his optimism. So this feeling of being trapped and being stuck and truly powerless is blocking the sort of naturally very dreamy, optimistic state he has. So the, emotional energy that he has available to him is this kind of sad union. This is a very sad looking Two of Cups. And the Five of Cups, which is, our spilled milk card, to use our very stereotypical Waite-Smith imagery. So his natural dreamy state is very blocked by the devil. What he has access to emotionally is kind of a much lesser hopefulness, a much lesser optimism if we just look numerologically from the 2 to the 9, and then like a feeling of having lost out on something. So that's interesting. But this very fresh looking color here, when compared to the others, just this is so bright, it stands out. Someone from the outside, someone different, someone unique, may hold the key to helping him make an informed decision. So the energy around the change of majors isn't bad, but guidance feels like it's really important. In both of those, what I didn't really talk about was the idea of light and shadow. You know what I mean? And how I know that. How I call on a card's lightness or its shadowness. There's no really elegant way for me to say that, right? If you're reading reversals, then the simple way into that is, if you've got a traditionally negative card and it's upright, then what you're looking at is the shadow of a shadow card. And if you've got a positive card and it's upright, you're looking at the positive side of the light side of the light card, right? Where if they're reversed, then you're looking at the light side of a shadow card and the shadow side of a light card. So if you use reversals, that's probably how you would do it. But if you're not using reversals, which more and more seems to be a trend right now, when I started reading, it was like you had to read reversals. If you weren't reading reversals, you were denying yourself, the true height of tarot wisdom. Over the years, I found that I just don't need them as much. How do I know that the devil is bad in this case? That the devil, I'm looking at the shadow aspect of the devil in this case? Because it's blocking his optimism, and I just felt it. You know what I mean? Like, the devil can be a card of sex and sexiness and passion and like, the I hate this word, but like the dirtier, darker, parts of our fantasy. You know what I mean? But and that if this were a reading about romance with all these cups, I might say the devil was about sex and spicing things up. But it's not about that. It's about changing your major. I could have read it differently. I could have said with all of this cups energy, you're so distracted by sex and emotion that you're actually, it doesn't matter what you major in, because your hormones are raging right now, and all you can think about is like girls. because there's a lot of women depicted around him. You know what I mean? So the major, if I had felt that initially, this may have been another reading. This may not even may. It would have been another reading entirely. That's not what I saw initially, but sometimes you see that and you go with it. If the devil had came to me initially and I had seen what is kind of a nebulous card. It's kind of bondage themed with kind of an incubus like quality to it. That may have been something that I thought this is why trusting your instincts is so important. That's that's your intuition. I in that case, the King of Swords, the King of Wands would have been a very different thing as well. Probably not a mentor. Here we've got a masculine card with a very masculine phallic suit looking away. So we've got a young man whose hormones are raging, who is so distracted by love and emotion and sex that he doesn't matter what he's going to major in, because his work is not the most important thing. He's just, to be very blunt, he's horny and interested in exploring that. But that's not how I felt initially when I read it. So what I felt was this kid who was totally at sea and feeling overwhelmed. Honestly, what I felt like with all this water was and with this fish, I had a kid who was like, I'm going to major in marine biology because it seems cool, and didn't realize how much like math was involved. And he's like, boy, I kind of wish I'd majored in art, or had majored in business, or, something that wasn't quite so wishy, washy, mathy, sea oriented. The sea felt very important in that case. But you hopefully you get the point. You know what I mean? It's really about trusting yourself and practicing. And then the reason why it's helpful to have, especially when you are practicing and starting out, the reason why it's so helpful to have someone that you're reading with is so that you can check yourself against that. But it doesn't, you can still practice from a distance. Like I talked about, when I started learning, the way I really did it was through the American Tarot Association's free reading networks. And that helped enormously. And I would say for every 10 readings I did, I'd maybe get one piece of feedback. But that piece of feedback was always interesting, because I would frequently get, oh my God, you're right on. Sometimes I would get, no, that doesn't make any sense. And if I was lucky enough to get someone who wanted to correspond a little bit, I could find out why. Sometimes the things that don't work are as interesting as the things that do. We learn from that. Practice is so important because we learn from the practice that doesn't work. So where am I off? Why are my instincts off? Maybe it's the deck, maybe it's the mood, maybe it's the place, maybe it's nerves. I remember, I'm gonna digress again. You can, but if you're still watching this, then you've gotten used to it, and if you're not, then you're not going to hear it. So I'll tell my story. When I was doing the tarot school correspondence course, one of the activities that they do, I feel like I'm giving away like a trade secret by saying this, but I feel like they've talked about it in their workshops and their books. So anyway, forgive me, tarot school, if I've done something uncouth by saying this. They do, and I won't even get into what it means and why, but they'll do a thing where it's actually, now that I think about it, it's actually not all that different from this method of reading. Whereas where I'm working with 6 cards and kind of playing with the energies of the cards. This method, you have a question about what do I do? What do I do to like make my career a little bit better? You pull one card, and this is so interesting. Our career question, we get the 10 of Pentacles. You pull one card, and and it's meant to be done with the Waite-Smith deck, which I don't have one nearby, but you pull one card and you look for, this is actually not a great example because it's such a repetitive image. You pull one card and, all right, let me not use this deck for this. It's just that it is meant to be done with the Waite-Smith deck, and because that deck is so symbol rich, that's why. So I'm going to use the Slow Holler, which is a very rich deck too. So how do I make my job better? You pull one card, and then in the card, boy, I'm getting all all these really simple cards to demonstrate. Um, how do I make my job better? You look at the card and something is going to stick out to you. Not the meaning of the card, not the usual card, but something. And what's sticking out to me is this little tulip up here. And so what the technique is that you ignore the whole card and you focus on the answer to the question being in this little red tulip. It's not easy. And I remember doing a reading for a friend. You're not supposed to do it for yourself. You're supposed to do it for someone else. So you would have a friend who says, how do I make my job better? And you pull a card and you get the 6 of stones, which in this case would be the 6 of pentacles. And you see this little red tulip. And that calls out to you. I think that's how you do it, or your friend does it, but whatever. Someone picks the little ing tulip or whatever, this little black dot. I picked the little red tulip. And now, that becomes the divinatory, thing, you know what I mean? So you, free associate, you do it like a little red tulip blossoms in early winter, or blossoms in Holland, right? I think of Holland where it's cold. I think of Hans Brinker and like ice, and springtime, blossoming, sort of a tight closed blossom. So maybe it's about looking at your job and peeling the blossom back, or even like looking at your job and saying, where's the red blossom? Like, where's the thing that excites me? Where's the little blossom in my job? And then sort of digging in there, peeling back the layers, the petals of that blossom until you find sort of what that very cupped tulip blossom of your job is there. So the secret to learning to enjoy your job more is like finding the thing that makes you happy, and that's like the flower that comes up first in spring. I actually have no idea of tulips. What I'm actually thinking of are daffodils, but whatever. Let's say but again, that doesn't really matter, right? Because it doesn't matter if the science of my interpretation of tulips is the thing. The thing that matters is that I'm associating tulips with the first flowers of spring, with flowers in a land that we usually think of as cold. At least I do, because of Hans Brinker. And of this sort of closed blossom, and that if you find the blossom in your job, find the thing that makes you happy, that feels like the red flower in this, barren landscape, opening up the petals of that and sort of digging deeper into it will show you how to enjoy your job. So anyway, the point of that was actually that I was supposed to practice that technique, and I did it for my friend, and I can't remember what card it was, and I can't remember what the symbol was, but I could not, first of all, I stared at the card and like nothing jumped out at me. Just nothing. I would look at the card and, let's say it was this one, and I would just stare, and I'm like, nothing. Like, even now, these sort of stalagmite, I never know which is which things, that's what's drawing me, So I in there, I would sort of find meaning in that. And I would say, there's this feeling of like a slow buildup over time, a very slow but steady, dripping action, a slow buildup of something that becomes imperceptibly larger. So something over time, ages of time, is, so if this were a timing question, it'd be really, really slow, but like total and complete surrender to like the slowness of something, right? Even though this is the strength card in this but so when I did this for a friend, I could not isolate a symbol. I could not make, when I finally just gave up and said, I'm going to focus on the horn, say, on this devil card, I couldn't make it mean anything. And so, it just completely stumped me. And again, as I've gone off on another tangent, the thing behind that, what I was getting at, is that nerves can really cramp you. Just now, doing it for no reason, I'm drawn by this L-shaped sort of knife, and what could that mean is that like something's partially opened, but its full usefulness isn't there yet. So something, you're getting close to cutting through the bullshit because it's a knife that's not open, but it's like you're not there yet. Like you're not close enough for it to be fully, whatever. Nerves was the point of that. Can really get in the way. And so practice is good because the more you can sort of dispel the nerves. Every time I lay out cards, I get nervous that it won't make sense. And there have been readings even in the past year that I've done for friends. There was one night where I was doing some readings that I, agreed to do. They were video readings. I got myself ready. I calmed down. I laid out the cards and nothing. I just could not. Nothing was coming. They just looked like pieces of paper. Just no meaning. I sat there for 10 minutes and sweated over it and then stopped the video, shuffled again, tried, and again, nothing was coming. Tried a different deck, nothing. I put it away and then came back to it the next day and it was fine. It's like writing or painting or whatever. Like sometimes the muses aren't there, If you read Elizabeth Gilbert's book Big Magic, she talks about how creativity, this idea of genius, someone who's a genius at something, was not the way that term originated. Like a genius wasn't someone, it was something you were visited by. So you were visited by genius. It wasn't something you were, it was something that came to you. So you could have a moment of genius and then years could go by without being, reading can be like that, but so is anything else, Anyway, once again, I have yammered on for far too long. Hopefully this is interesting as always. And I hope you're doing well. Like I said, I'm struggling coming with ideas for videos, but, I'll keep working and be good and be well, and I'll talk to you soon.